Welcome to All Nature Connected, a podcast created by the Forest Bathing Institute where we explore all nature connected topics, including nature and health, nature inspired lifestyle, nature connection and forest bathing, nature preservation, and eco awareness. We hope that this podcast will inspire you to become more connected with nature and your own health and well-being. Hello everyone, this is Olga from the Forest Bathing Institute, and today we have a very special guest, Justine, with us. And hello, very happy to see you here. And I actually would like you to introduce yourself, if that's all right with you, because Justine has a very beautiful bio and such an amazing journey that you've gone through. And of course, I would love to talk to you more about it today.
Thank you, Olga. Well, I mean, when you're in your journey, you don't generally view it as particularly exceptional because I think you've gone through all the stages to get there. And I presume most of your audience looking at this will know that you have to go through some pain to follow your journey, and then the journey's never really over. But in terms of just, I suppose, a quickish bio, then, and who I am and what I do as a top line, really. So for many years, I've worked in the travel industry for a big portion of my life, but creating experiences, a little bit different, creating experiences for big consumer brands that they use as part of their marketing campaigns, and always really liking things that were on the edge of the mainstream or the zeitgeist. So I was part of this travel company that set up a long time before travel was really talking about the experience rather than the size of the hotel room or the fluffiness of the pillows. So what experience can you have? Where can you go for amazing experiences? That was, a good over 20 years ago, actually, that we started that. And then I had my own journey in terms of well-being. I grew up doing a lot of physical well-being, and my dad had a sports shop and a little health club. But I sort of gradually got to understand a bit more about mental and emotional well-being, and started exploring that really for myself. And then just to sort of, cut to the headlines, but I set up a company called The Life Adventure, which is mostly for organizations. And we run workshops and retreats, away days, online sessions around what really is, I would say, is emotional well-being. But I think you can encompass all of that, really, I think, because I think it's a holistic process. You don't work on just one part of it. And then over the course of that process, I read about something called forest bathing. It must be about 6 years ago, I think. And I said, what's that? That sounds fascinating. And so I began what I feel is quite a long journey to reconnecting to nature and teaching others how to do that. And then I've always practiced breathwork. I mean, always, I say for the last 12 years, I practiced breathwork. That's another story to delve into. But in the last few years, I decided to train as a coach to run sessions and share my love of breathwork with people. And as another very quick headline, I love sea bathing. I grew up in Cornwall and have always been by the sea. And I don't know what happened, but one day I decided that I wanted to set up a community project, not really having ever done that before, to encourage people back into the sea to improve their confidence and their well-being before that really became a thing. That was, well, we're going to celebrate our fifth birthday this year. So that's a community project which I tend to probably not, probably a lot of people don't realize, but probably a lot of my energy and thoughts go into that as much as anything else. So that wasn't very quick, but that is the headline. So I hope that all made sense.
It's beautiful. And I think any interesting story, it's never quick. So we
No.
actually in our podcast look for interesting long stories. And I think yours is definitely ticking all the boxes. And what an amazing journey. So from working in the travel industry and then transforming into a breathwork coach, into a forest bathing guide, and now leading sea bathing sessions. It's a very brave journey. I would say, would you remember a moment in your life when you were working in the travel industry, which made you decide, maybe I just want to change what I'm doing. Maybe there's something else out for me.
No, because that's still evolving and I still do run a travel company. And sometimes I worry about that and I feel like I'm not really focusing on one thing and I've got too many things that are going on in my life. But there's some practicalness to it as well. Running a community project, even though on a day-to-day basis it runs itself, it's still annual planning, thinking about things to do. It's constantly evolving. That takes a lot of time. You have to, I find that, I'm still at an age where I have to balance paying the bills with doing things that I love. So, I still love working in travel, to be honest. It's a bit conflicting sometimes with what's going on in the world and climate change. And to help balance that and also learn a bit more about this, I put my company through what's called a B Corp certification. And I'm glad you understand it. I mean, we can go into that a little bit deeper, but to sort of understand the process of whilst you're offering practices that have a negative effect on the world in terms of mainly in the case of flying, travel does an awful lot of amazing things for all of us, even our well-being, but how many people it employs across the planet, the growth that it's provided for me as a person in terms of traveling and the things that I've seen and that I've done. How can you balance it? Can you balance it even? So there wasn't a point because I'm still actually doing all of these things. And this year, I'm really enjoying that. Whereas towards the end of last year, I found that it was stressful because I think felt there was too many things going on and I should be more pinpointed and focused. So I say that because I think what I've come to really understand is in life there isn't often an and or. There's not like a black and white. There's not a this or a that. There's all these things, and actually, from a day-to-day, even on a day-to-day basis, those can change. And I think as long as I'm being in my truth today, and this is how I feel today, I make no apologies for the fact that that may change tomorrow. And I think that's about being open-minded and authentic, really, is what I strive to be. But also that is a work in progress always.
Oh, Justine, thank you so much. It's such a refreshing view, I think, on our life and very realistic one as well. So I do know that I think currently it feels a bit like a battle between maybe the perfect way to do things and the normal life that just carries on, the process of modernization and technology developing out of hand and all this. And I think just kind of touching the ground and being a bit more grounded with everything that's happening while being mindful about the things that we might need to change as a society and personal choice. Like for me, it's incredible and mind-blowing. And maybe we will need to talk about it if you are open to it in another interview about your B Corp certification, which I know is such a massive amount of work. And I'm so glad that you're doing it. I think it's incredible. But just kind of having a perspective where And I'm so happy to hear you still have your job, where the traveling job, because then you are combining the holistic way of doing things with your normal way of life that most of us still have. And I don't believe we need to all run into the woods and, and just abandon all the technology, anything. It's just being a bit more holistic and balanced and ethical in our day-to-day life. I hope that one day we will be looking more at biofuels and maybe other alternative ways to travel. I mean, I love trains. I think it's so much fun. And maybe if we change our mentality about, trains, they're not long, they're not boring, it's actually an experience. So all these things, it can make our lives much more fulfilling. And I feel what you were saying about your mindset, you mentioned about your mindset, day-to-day perspective on things has changed. So if you can just talk a little bit more maybe about that. I know you are a breath coach, so you do lots of things to influence how you're breathing, to maybe influence how you react to certain situations. But maybe if you can just touch a little bit about your mindset, how does your mindset and maybe breath work or other things you do influence how you look at things and how you achieve this, I would say, quite balanced view on life in a changing world?
Yes. And I think that the word that really stood out to me when you spoke was about realistic. And I've come to realize that that's a really important trait for me to have. I'm always quite practical and realistic because I really connect to the phrase "teach what you most need to learn." It can be used quite derogatively. I mean, last week somebody was talking about a psychotherapist who life was in a mess herself, but she's sitting there as a psychotherapist therapizing someone else. I think that that's the reality, and I don't think there's any issue with that really, because as long as you're giving good advice and you're being authentic and you're being real, then there's nothing wrong with that, because we're sharing what we're learning as we're going along. So I've come from a background of, I mean, I'm quite interested in astrology. So I'm an Aries. My personality type is busy. It's I also really, like I mentioned earlier, I'm really interested that are things that are quite new, or on the edges of the zeitgeist, of the mainstream. Forest bathing before it was a thing, breath work 12 years ago, when I first read about it, I'm like, what is that? All the travel industry, things that were, I'm really interested in that. It becomes more and more difficult because there's so much now that's coming to the surface and people are learning about. And so sometimes you're kind of there, and then all of a sudden it's the mainstream, and before you know it, it's gone and we're on to something else. But what I've really come to, and as I said, this is where I am today. It's where I've been for quite a while, but I can't say where I'll be tomorrow, which is that it's important to incorporate all of these things that work for us into our life, and to weave, I mean, you've kind of touched on that already, and to weave them in to the daily life to help you. So for me, the things probably that I've also been connected to, so for example, the forest bathing and the breath work, and even sea bathing or being in any body of water, is about slowing down, because that's what I need. So when I take people out forest bathing particularly, and I do my introduction, it's really important to me to be authentic. It's not, I'm not standing here from a background of I spent all my time meditating because my parents lived like that. Not at all. My parents are still very busy people. It stood them in quite good stead, actually, because they're very active at 82. But it's just about being realistic, which is the reason that I was probably drawn to forest bathing, is because I needed to slow down. And I can still even feel that sometimes when I go into the woods, even though I've done my breath work in the morning, and which I do, most mornings I will do my breath work practice, and I will try and go out into nature every morning. but I will still say, you know, I need this as much as you. And it's really, really important. And it does come from a place of integrity for me, is to be realistic. And I like forest bathing because you have a lot of the science to back it up. And I think that's really important for people. Breath work, yes, there is some science, but it's more of an ancient practice that we're relearning, and the science is kind of catching up. They're starting to do that now. But it's just being realistic. So I now do have these practices that, having been through, I would probably say 20 years of exploring, you know, you can tell from the things that I've said, I've been chasing quite a lot of things. Chasing is often a negative word, and it feels a bit exhausting. And sometimes it was, because I've had a thirst to learn. And I think there'll probably be a lot of people watching that understand that. There's always the danger of being that person that does workshop after workshop after workshop. You hear it said, and I've caught myself with that. And maybe I've just done enough for now. I don't know. But also I've come to be at peace with myself in that I am the person that is curious. You know, I helped to, we co-authored a book, 15 Women. Really, the project was managed by a friend of mine called Claudia Roth, and she started with an online coffee morning during COVID, which was, let's just get together, her and friends, online and have a coffee and kind of work out what on earth's going on, to interviewing some people, because she knew people from all over the world, because she spent time in the travel industry. That then became, you know, why don't we write a book together? And my chapter, I think the title was changed in the end just to suit, you know, the book coming together. But the original title was Just Say Yes. And it was about a life of curiosity. But again, coming back to the words that feel like a theme today are realistic, authentic, but also I think curiosity, but balance in that curiosity, because otherwise it's kind of endless. So it's finding that balance, and that balance for me now is in the breath work and the nature connection, for sure, in terms of my daily practices. But that nature connection for me, and even the breath work, but particularly, you know, talking about forest bathing or nature connection, I feel that is going to be a lifetime of practice. I don't know about you, but the more that I learn, I'm Welsh by birth. My mum's Welsh speaking. But we moved to Cornwall when I was 3. Didn't keep up the Welsh speaking, but both Celtic, you know, Celtic countries, nations. Cornwall will always say they're a separate country, but I wanted to explore my Celtic roots. But in exploring my Celtic roots, not really even knowing what that meant, I went down the route of doing courses around what's called Celtic shamanic work. But what is that really? It's really going back to all the things that we've lost, particularly in this country. You know, I've traveled the world. I love other countries. I love chatting to people from other countries and understanding their cultures. And I probably ignored this one. And I feel that I'm wanting to develop my understanding, but to go back in time. And that going back in time is really all about our connection to nature, or our disconnection to nature, of course, which is one thing that we talk about with forest bathing. But that just goes on and on and on, like back to lifetimes ago, really, particularly in this country, you know, where we lost our connections through, you know, I talk about lots of things, but probably when we move from being hunter-gatherers to arable farmers, then the next stage, which is Christianity, and that slight disconnection from nature. We're going to go and worship something greater than ourselves in a building through a priest or a vicar, to the Industrial Revolution, and then to phones, you know, all those things. So I'm born in this time. So I'm unlearning, but I'm also learning at the same time. So again, a long answer to your question, but that's really where I feel I am at this moment. And where the sea and the water comes in is really this exploration of all these elements. So the breath with the air, the water. I'm just drawn to water, and I find that with a lot of the people that now come and join the sea bathing group is they have this need to be in the water. I've always been like that. If I see water, I just want to be in it. The earth, that deep connection with the earth through the forest bathing, nature connection practices. And then the last one is fire, which is sort of circling me a bit, but running maybe, when time allows, community circles, bringing people together around the fire. I've just done a storytelling a series of workshops. I've joined them with a Welsh lady, Angarad Wynn, actually, and just learning again that lost art for most of us of storytelling. So bringing in all those four elements, I think, is a lifetime's work. So yeah, I hope that answers a little bit of what you asked.
That's so interesting, Justine. I can even hear like there is so much, like it could be a movie or a book, because it feels like your story is a bit like a story of how I feel, and I feel lots others. Because if you think about how we as humans developed from hunters gatherers to then moving further away from nature to modernization, urbanization, and now techno boom, further and further away from nature, it feels like how you describe things, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are still living in the present life because of the needs that you have, and most of us do still have to cover our bills, everyday cost of life. But then at the same time, you're slowly and in a balanced way, and it does seem like you have explored a lot of things. So you're still looking out for things to help you, but you are moving closer and closer to that state of more union with nature through the modalities that felt most like they resonated best with you. And what I love that you're highlighting is that it's never an end point. So you are still looking to doing more things, but it feels like sometimes it can feel like too much. And I don't blame people. I think we don't really have any clue sometimes how to get back to that point of union. And we try lots of different things. There are so many things out there, no new trends. And if you don't try, you don't know. But then once you have tried and you know that water is good for you, you have this affinity with water or with nature or with breathing, with certain way to breathe, or with community work, I feel that maybe that's the time to just slow down a bit and explore that rather than look for another trend. It's more like a feeling, isn't it? It's not like you think that you need something, you feel that you need something. And that's where the difference is with me. When I think about things I've done in my life, it was either for practical reason or for a feeling reason. It was never kind of out of everyone's doing it, I must be doing it. As same as you, I've been doing exploring for maybe not 20 years, but yeah, actually around 18 years. I started yoga 18 years ago, just for health reasons. My spine was not quite straight, so I needed to straighten my spine. Forest bathing came out of need to de-stress I was in the middle of London in the Farnham area, so it's a Farnham Farrington area, very busy area. And I just needed to slow down and relax, and that helped me. And then other things like wild swimming, it's incredible, isn't it? And I'm sure we can do another episode just on that. But not being scared, what I really enjoy that you shared, that so many things you've tried, just having that, I think we live in such a vast world, but at the same time, it can sometimes be quite boxed, because I feel that sometimes people just don't let themselves go and follow their hearts. They're just like within those limits of what's acceptable, but just following that intuition, that feeling, whatever you have. And the more you try to follow it, I feel the more it actually leads you to things you need. And it doesn't mean that you suddenly drop everything and leave somewhere. If unless you have a very strong feeling, but most of us, I don't feel we would. But, but just honoring that feeling while living a very balanced, healthy life. So that journey is a very beautiful one. What was the book that you referred to? Can you name it?
Yes, yeah, and we can maybe put a link afterwards. We just actually published it ourselves, but it's called The Trials and Tribulations of these 15 women from different parts of the world, from Britain, from America, from Germany. We'll put a link at the end, but they're all based around women's stories and what they've been through to get to where they are today and the learnings that they've been through. But interesting you should mention it, because I also wrote a book. You said, oh, you should write a book about these things. I have written a book. I wrote it in lockdown, which I sort of gave it a working title of Finding Wisdom in the Forest. And it's a little bit about forest bathing, but it also incorporates all the different things that we've talked about, really. So the 4 elements, less so about the fire, because that's, for me, that's the kind of missing part that's coming in terms of my knowledge and understanding. But there's so much discussion now around the sun and the solar energy and how important that is. It has been important to us, but how it's going to be even more important moving forward. But I haven't gone out to publish that yet, because it's a long and quite hard process. So there is a book there in the making. But what I really felt when you were talking is this idea of embodied practices, and I talk about this with the breath work, even forest bathing actually, is if you've got a triangle here, you've got the flat edge of the triangle and the pointy bit here. We're energetic beings, and all of our energy has been up here probably since the Industrial Revolution. It's all been about the brain. What's the mind telling you? What's the mind thinking? The practices that we've spoken about, all 3 of those, but even sitting around the fire, is embodying, bringing our attention and our focus down to our bodies. Because for hundreds of years now, we thought that everything is about the brain and what we think. And now we're beginning to understand, a great book I'm sure you know about it, The Body Keeps the Score. All of these things that have affected us over the course of our lifetime, the small traumas, the anxiousness, to the big things, divorce, death, all these things. We live in a society, particularly in Britain, where it's changing, but as long as I've been brought up in my parents' generation, it's quite sort of Victorian, in that you don't show your feelings, you suppress them. And so what happens is they build up in the body, because quite often we're going into this, what's called the sympathetic nervous system, this fight, flight, and freeze mode. And when these waves of energy come up, whatever it might be, grief, anxiety, or hundreds of different emotions that we can feel, and we think it's not appropriate to feel them, or we don't want to get upset because we're in the workplace, we don't want to deal with things because we're too busy, and we're worried that if we open the lid to what's in there, the things that we don't want to see, quickly shut it again, because if we start to let it out, what's going to happen? And we suppress everything. And what we haven't been taught, and what is the case, is all of these, what really is our emotional baggage, gets stored in our body. When I do breathwork sessions with people, I talk about this being like a dusty old filing cabinet. My teacher taught me this. You're opening up the drawers and you've got all these files of unprocessed emotional baggage, which in effect is unprocessed energy that's residing in the body, and finding ways to gently release that. You can go to talking therapy, or you can go to a breathwork session, but also, I'm sure you've experienced it many times yourself, is people come to the forest. And, I ran a session last year with a group of people who had never done it before, and they kind of, a long story, had sort of been shoehorned into coming along. It was a community project. And one gentleman, we hadn't even really started on the invitations, and he was in tears. He'd been in the army, he'd experienced quite a lot of trauma and probably PTSD, and just sitting in the forest, And you know, it was quite shocking to him. So these practices about working with the body, being embodied, and understanding that the body not only has access to the conscious mind, but also the subconscious where all our stuff is stored. So it's about inverting that triangle to be balanced. The mind is great for problem solving and lots of things, but you know, we're understanding a lot more. Well, the gut brain has been the thing for a while, but we're moving into the heart brain, and it's possibly even more powerful than everything else. There's a wonderful institute in America which you can access just as easily here called the Heart Math Institute. And again, that's around breathing practices, but learning that it's not just about this brain, that it's about the gut brain, your intuition, and really what's going on here, how the intelligence of the heart. So embodied practices, I think, are the way forward.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And I think that I would really love to talk to you about the breath work. Maybe we can do it another time, because it is another practice that keeps coming up. And we had one of our team talking about the exercises or the practices that he does with breathing. So it would be actually interesting to hear another view as well, and maybe even some practices that we can try. I know that it's the breath and how we teach it in our training, it's so linked to our thoughts, the speed of our thoughts, of course, the speed of our heart, the speed of our metabolism, and how well the blood gets into our, different organs, different systems in the body, hormones, etc. I can go on and on, but of course, you know more about it than I do. So I would love to hear about that. But I really love and appreciate that you seem to be coming from a very practical viewpoint. I think many of these modalities are maybe misunderstood by many people, and I'm so grateful that more research is done in forest bathing and other modalities like breath work, because people don't understand that they are not there as a one person described what we were doing as a bohemian thing, you know, something that maybe has lots of airs around it, something quite fancy out there, but actually very practical. And in fact, it can improve the lives of millions of people. And it's not difficult. It's not, often it's available to you at your doorstep, like nature, and even in your body, like breath work. So changing mentality of people and knowing that all these modalities and fancy words, they don't actually refer to something that's out there, but for everyone, every one of us in our everyday life, is very, very good to hear from you. So I would love to continue that conversation, maybe in another episode. So thank you very much, Justine, for today's wisdom. I felt it was a privilege to talk to you, and I would just leave you the last word, maybe just if you would like to share where we can find more about you, information on your events or activities.
Thank you, Olga. It's been a pleasure talking to you as well. So breathwork, it comes under wonderbreath.co is the website. So retreats, workshops, online sessions, and sessions that I run in local yoga studios. So I live in Caterham in Surrey, so there and around. Forest bathing is a website called forestbathingmadeinbritain.com. But of course, your audience has a very good resource already with you for that. And the sea bathing group is on the south coast, Selsey near Chichester. And it's called, the website is selseysseabathingsociety.com. And anyone is welcome there. We run sort of more organized monthly sessions. That's where it really all began. But now we have a WhatsApp group, and even though it's a small community, so many people now wanting to swim, not only during the summer, but the winter as well. So we have a WhatsApp group to post. Sometimes there can be 2 or 3 dips a day, just whoever wants to go and wants company just puts a post up and you can just join. So that's free at any time. And it's a very not clicky group. There's people coming from outside the area quite often to join the group, people that pop in because maybe they're visiting parents or friends in the area. So anyone is always welcome there to join, and it's totally free. So your viewers and listeners would be welcome to come to any of those sessions.
Thank you very much, Justine. And I would love to pop in if I ever in the area, because I'm such a big, I love swimming. I just like, especially cold water, there's something in it. But also your events, I would love to come to your forest bathing session. So I will have a look.
Very welcome.
And yeah, please, our listeners, do look at the websites and find out some more information. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olga.